Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I want to first introduce myself. My name is Frankie, and I'm one of the registered dietitians here at GenoPalette. I received my master's degree in nutrition and dietetics from the University of Illinois at Chicago, where I also completed my dietetic internship. I'm also a certified specialist in sports dietetics, so I love to help people with their performance goals. I'm also passionate about helping others with mindful eating and their weight management goals. I place a focus on helping others improve their relationship with food and navigate the misinformation in the media and feel empowered to trust their bodies. So that's just a little bit about me, but let's get into this information for you. First and foremost, thank you, GenoPalette members, for being here. Just a couple housekeeping things to cover. I will be presenting for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then if you do have any questions that come up, please email our customer experience team at hello@genopalette.com. We're happy to answer any questions for you or clarify anything. A quick review of what we'll be covering. I'll cover how to review your report, how to interpret those results, and then how to put them into action. So before we dive into your report, it is helpful to have a background on how your report was created and some of the basics of nutrition and genetics. This information can get a little science heavy, so bear with me. But either through existing DNA or a kit, your DNA was analyzed for over 100 different genes. If you're not familiar, genes are the basic physical and functional unit of heredity that make up our DNA. Genes give instructions for making protein molecules that carry out functions such as how we metabolize nutrients. So this is really important for making us who we are and for giving our bodies the instructions to function properly. Scientists have identified up to 26,000 different genes, and while humans are 99.9% the same, there may actually be 3 million differences between you and me. What makes us different is our genotype, or our genetic variants, which are the specific combination for each gene. So as you can see on your screen to the left side, genes are typically named with a combination of capital letters and numbers. And then if you look at the second gene that's listed in this picture, the AGT gene shown in that dark green, you can see to the right that the genotype is the AA variant for the AGT gene. Research has shown that for people with this genotype, there were statistically significant benefits for following a lower sodium diet. So once we know your genes, we can help paint a picture of what that may look like in real life. So you can think of this as your genes are the blueprint for building the house, and your phenotype is the actual house and what it looks like. We help to put your genes into practice by recommending foods that best match your genetic recommendations. Now, you might be wondering how we do that or how we're able to come to those conclusions. Well, we've looked at studies with people who have similar genes as you, and then we look at how they responded to different foods by looking at outcomes such as BMI, cholesterol levels, blood sugar control, and tolerance. So for example, people with that AA genotype in their AGT gene had better blood pressure with a lower sodium diet, which is why you may have been recommended a lower sodium profile if you have that AA genotype. So once we have that profile of you, we then match it with your top 85 plus foods. And if you have, for example, a lower sodium recommendation, you will see that then accounted for in your food recommendations. As you can see in this picture, this is an example of how 3 genes matched with the kiwi, and we're looking at over 100 genes and matching them then in our extensive food database. Now that we have some baseline for your genetics, I'm going to do a short demonstration of how to navigate the website and your results. I will be showing it on my computer browser, but you can also use your mobile phone to view the results with the GenoPalette app. The app will have the same information that I'm talking about here. It's going to have a slightly different setup though. So let me switch over my screen. All right, so hopefully you can all see what it would look like if you were to log into your account on genopalette.com. So right away, you'll see welcome message, a sneak peek of your macronutrients, These are the nutrients that you need the most of, and we will talk about this more in a bit. When you scroll down, you'll see a brief view of your optimal foods. And then if you keep scrolling, we have the Genopalette University, and this is where you can learn more about genetics and nutrition. Where you can find the details of your nutrition recommendations, those are going to be up here at the Nutrients tab. Here you'll see the tabs at the top for each of the categories of nutrients. So we have fats all the way to substances. And then when you click into them, you'll see the subcategories. So for example, if we click into carbohydrates, you see here the subcategories. So in each of these nutrients, you can also click to learn more. So we'll click into fiber. And within the nutrient, it shows you where you compare to the average recommendations, gives you more detail about your recommendation. You can learn more about that nutrient, the benefits of the nutrient, tips and best sources. And then as you continue to scroll, here's where the genetic component comes in. Keep in mind, all the nutrient pages have a similar setup. So here, again, is where the genetic component comes in. If you go down here, you'll see the genes that were detected. Genes in the blue, so up here, are what we call impactful, or the ones that had statistically significant research showing that you may benefit from either more or less of a nutrient. And then genes in this gray or charcoal were genes that did not have a statistical significance with either more or less of that nutrient. So we can think of these as neutral genotypes since it's not affecting your nutrition recommendations. You can then actually click into the gene to learn more. We'll give you more insight behind those recommendations, more about what that gene does. And then here at the bottom, if you want to even go further into it, this link will take you out of your report into the peer-reviewed research supporting that recommendation. Again, all the genes have that. One more thing I want to show you here is up at the Foods tab. So here is where you're going to find your list of optimal foods. To the left are the different categories, and when you click the categories, you'll see the top foods in each of those categories. So for example, here we have red peppers is my top vegetable. And then these foods with the trophies at the top, these were your closest matches to your recommendations based on your genetics. So again, these ones are going to be your top foods in that foods list. And then ones here that are underneath the trophies are still great matches. They just didn't quite make it to those top foods. When you click into each of the foods, you'll see more information about that particular food and then the nutrients that you would find in that food. You'll also see here where it says good match. So if it has a check mark, that means it matched your genetic needs. So here we see a lot of check marks with the red bell pepper, which again, it was my top vegetable, so that makes sense. Keep in mind, here's the serving size here. You do not need to eat a full cup of red bell pepper. You absolutely can, but just keep that in mind if you're looking for a specific amount of a nutrient, that the serving size is right there. Another feature I want to show you is the settings button right here. So here is where you can filter for different allergies, preferences, diet types at any time. So if you click into here, you'll see the different options for allergies or preferences. You see that I have gluten and wheat checked off. That's because I have a gluten sensitivity, so those are taken off of my list. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, add them back on, I could. But keep that in mind, you do have different category options here. At the bottom is the uncommon foods filter, we like to call it. So you may have noticed some more uncommon foods or unusual foods on your foods list. And while they do provide wonderful nutrients, if you're not quite ready to branch out with those yet, that's perfectly fine. You can take them off your list, and when you're ready, you can always add them back on. Then we have a few different diet types that you can filter for. And then individual foods. So if there's a food you're allergic to or sensitive to that was not on the allergies list, or a food you just don't like, you can absolutely take it out. That way you can really customize your foods list to you. Another question we often get is how to print off that foods list. So what you'll do is click Export Foods List, and to the left you'll see instructions on how to save as a PDF or how to print this foods list off. That can be handy if you're going grocery shopping. So that's just a quick demonstration of how to find all the information on your results. Don't worry, we'll go through it a little bit more together, but I just wanted to show you some of how to navigate that. All right. So as we saw on the homepage, your macronutrients are listed first. If you aren't familiar with macronutrients, they include carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and they're the nutrients we need the most of. Many people ask why they're listed as percentages here rather than grams or calories. And this is because in the research, they look at the percentage of daily calorie intake, since it's the one thing they can keep consistent from person to person, since we're all going to have different calorie needs. The percentage of daily intake from a certain nutrient is what the scientific results are then based off of. And as I mentioned earlier, your recommendations for each macronutrient were based on peer-reviewed research studies. So the percentages indicate a percentage of your calories dedicated to each of these three categories. They should all add up to around 100%. Now, on the GenoPalette app, you can toggle between the percentages and the calories or grams of these macronutrients. We have been able to provide you with an estimated energy need based on your answers to the onboarding questions, such as your age, height, weight, activity level, and goals. So keep that in mind if you wanted to check that out on the app. But let's take a look at how these macronutrients might look when put into practice. So here's an oversimplified example of what a plate of food may look like based on the macronutrient recommendations. The numbers are rounded to make an easy comparison, but take a minute to think about what your plate may look like based on your GenoPalette recommendations. And I say it's an oversimplified example because we know that fat contains more calories than carbs and protein per gram, so this image isn't exactly accurate. But as you can see this plate, you can start thinking of how to structure your plate to better meet your macronutrient recommendations. If you're like me, you may eat many of your meals as mixed dishes, maybe from a bowl, like a soup, salad, or pasta. But just try to picture what it would be like if you were to separate the components of your mixed dish into sections on a plate, similar to this image, so you can better understand those percentages. And then in recent years, many people have leaned towards the lower carb or higher fat lifestyle, and this may make some of you nervous to see a higher carb recommendation. And if this is the case for you, feel free to start small, maybe adding 1 or 2 different carbohydrates from your foods list each day, or even each week, however you feel comfortable. When we talk about higher carbs, we're really going to be encouraging those nutrient-dense carbohydrate sources. So this means foods that are high in beneficial nutrients for you. As you build your plate, your carbs may come from starchy vegetables, fruit, whole grains, and legumes, filling the remainder of your plate with proteins and fats. So proteins from meat, seafood, tofu, legumes, or dairy sources, and then fats coming from oils, nuts, seeds, or avocado. So hopefully this helps you to picture your plate with your macronutrients a little bit better. So here's an example of what it might look like if you were using a food tracking app. As you can imagine, this would be a bit more accurate in terms of tracking those macronutrients. There are many easy-to-use applications now, such as MyFitnessPal, Lose It, or Chronometer, to help with those tracking efforts. You do not need to food log or food track, but I just wanted to give you the option if you wanted to get a closer idea of where you're currently at and what to tweak to get closer to those GenoPalette recommendations. Diving a little bit more into those categories, again, you can navigate each of your nutrients with the tabs at the top to view more of the subcategories within each macronutrient. For example, like we saw in the demonstration, under the carbohydrates tab, you can see your recommendations for sugars, total carbs, and fiber. For fats, you can see your recommendations for total fat, saturated fat, omega-3, omega-6, and monounsaturated fats. And you'll notice some are listed as a percentage of total calories, and some are listed in grams, milligrams, or micrograms. The grams and micrograms are usually found in the categories that we just need smaller amounts of. So think of those vitamins and minerals. If you have a question about why that recommendation was made for you, again, you can scroll down to the bottom of that nutrient page and click into that gene to learn more. As we saw in the demonstration, you can learn more about why you were recommended that amount based on your genetics. And then again, if you're interested, you can dive into the research behind the recommendation. Now, going back into personalization a bit more, we encourage you to use that food filter or the settings button as needed to personalize your results based on any allergies, preferences, or sensitivities. We know that there is a hereditary aspect of allergies, as those who have family members with an allergy have a higher chance of having one as well. But there are so many other factors that go beyond your DNA, such as your environment, your microbiome, medical history, and exposure. Therefore, genes account for about 30% of our health. Because there are a lot of things that go beyond our genetics that affect our health, DNA cannot give an exact diagnosis. You might see that your report says you may be sensitive to gluten or lactose. Those then should already be selected as filters for you here. But if your report says you may have a sensitivity, however, you know you actually have no issues with either gluten or lactose, you can always unselect that filter so that your report will include foods with either gluten or lactose in them again. Although DNA can give some clues, we want you to be able to account for other factors that affect how you metabolize foods. Epigenetics is the study of how your lifestyle, behaviors, and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. And epigenetic changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence, but they can change how your body reads a DNA sequence. It is a dynamic process, therefore these changes are reversible again. One example is a lactose sensitivity. So maybe this did not show up on your GenoPalette report, however, you know you do have an issue digesting lactose. This could be due to a secondary lactose sensitivity. For example, getting sick, being put on antibiotics, could have changed your gut microbiome, and now you experience some sensitivity to lactose. This would be different than a primary lactose sensitivity or one that we would see in the DNA. So we encourage you to take the foundation from GenoPalette and build on it based on your lifestyle, current medical conditions, and experiences. Of course, check with your medical team before making any major changes. All right, digging into those optimal foods a little bit more. As I mentioned, your foods were chosen for you because they were the best match based on your genetics-based recommendations. The ones on the top are going to have the closest match to your recommendations, again, with those trophies at the top. If a food did not show up on your list, it does not mean that it's a bad food. It just means that it didn't match as closely as the other foods. For example, oranges didn't show up on my list, but it doesn't mean that I can't eat them. I may just try to choose the foods that are on my list more often than others. You may be wondering what to do if you see foods that are unfamiliar or maybe that you don't like. And it's totally fine if you don't like something. Just try to choose those other foods from the same category on your foods list. And then, of course, as we saw in the demonstration, you can always remove the foods from your list. Or if you're on the fence about a food, you can always give it a try. We have heard from customers that they suddenly love beets or Brussels sprouts after seeing it on their report and trying it out. Now that we've gone through navigating your report and what it means, let's talk about how to put that report into action. So this is where we can start to get into what you can do today to use your results. If you're feeling overwhelmed at all, don't worry. There are many simple steps you can take to begin to use your report. And remember, it's helpful not to try to make a lot of changes at once. A great place to start would be to try to incorporate more of your top foods. So, are there any simple substitutions you can make? For example, maybe you enjoy making burrito bowls. What meat could you substitute with from your report? Or if you like salads, could you try a new leafy green from your optimal foods list? So, those top foods were designed to give you the best nutritional bang for your buck. So, really just beginning to add these foods into your eating pattern is going to be a great place to start. Another place to start would be to compare your current eating pattern to your recommended macronutrient profile. So, maybe you've been trying to do a lower carb diet and then you got a higher carb recommendation. While that may be scary, maybe you could try slowly adding more of those starchy vegetables or whole grains and start to see how you feel. And I know some GenoPalette users have found food tracking helpful, like I mentioned earlier. Again, those apps out there, whether that be MyFitnessPal, Lose It, or Chronometer, can be really helpful in this case. So feel free to track your intake for a few days, see where you're currently at, and maybe what you could do to adjust or tweak your eating to get closer to those macronutrient recommendations. Similarly, you could take a look at your micronutrient needs. So this isn't going to be as easy when it comes to picturing it on a plate to see if you're meeting those needs. So again, that's where the tracking is going to be helpful. You could then see if there are any gaps or areas you can improve on. Now, what if some of the foods on your report seem really unfamiliar? One thing I like to do when introducing myself to new foods is to add or swap them into dishes that are familiar to me. So maybe, for example, you got amaranth on your foods list and aren't sure what to do with it. You could try to add it into a dish that you currently make that normally uses rice. So adding foods this way can help to introduce them just in a more comfortable way. So you're introducing it into dishes that you already enjoy. Now that we've talked through your report and how to put it into action, let's take a second to reflect. Take a moment to think about and answer the following questions. What did you learn from your report? Did anything surprise you? Did anything open your mind? What small change could you make today that may make a big difference over time? Setting goals is linked with higher achievement, so feel free to share your goals with friends or family members, or even a coworker. Oftentimes when we share our goals with other people, it helps to hold us accountable and helps us reach those goals. I wanted to share some goals that other GenoPalette members have shared that helped get them started. So one could be, maybe you could add one new food to your grocery list this week when you go grocery shopping. Could you make a substitution for one of the foods in your meals this week? Could you adjust your lunch plate tomorrow to reflect your macronutrient recommendations a little more closely? Remember, as you go on after today, your goals don't have to be large or intimidating. You can start with something small, something that you can begin with today or tomorrow, and then add on from there once you feel comfortable. We at GenoPalette are here to help you with your accountability as well. We'd love to stay connected. We do have a Facebook group where we post fun recipes. You can ask questions. We do fun challenges, and it's really a great way to find that sense of community. The group is called the GenoPalette Members Forum. You'll also be getting the Activate email campaign with more tips and applications for your report, so keep an eye out for those. And then we recommend you download the mobile app so you can take it with you when you go grocery shopping to have that foods list convenient. Or like we saw in the demonstration, you can also print that off. And we do offer personalized supplements, so let us know if you have any questions about those. Again, you can email hello@genopalette.com. And then we more recently started offering one-on-one nutrition consultations. So if you're interested in talking about any health-related goals that you have, whether that's weight management, a performance goal, or even just how to implement this report in your daily life, this is going to be a great space to do that. Keep in mind it's select states only at this time. And then again, if any questions came up from this presentation for you, please give us an email at hello@genopalette.com so that we can answer those questions and clarify anything for you. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this and to learn more about how to navigate the website and really get to know yourself even more. Have a great rest of your day.